Hello! So today I thought I would talk about one of the books that I really liked reading last year. I finished it at the end of 2020 and I think it won one of the Goodreads awards. It is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I have never read any books by him, any other books by him. This is the first book that I read by him. I'm going to split this video in two parts. The first one is going to be spoiler free and it's going to be just a short summary, and then I will dive deep into the discussion. There will be time stamps down in the description below. We don't really have a script or anything like that, so I'm just gonna babble some words out. I should also put a trigger warning here for discussing some heavy topics, specifically depression and suicide. So if you think you're not in a place where you want to hear something like this right now, then please click away and I will have a more lighthearted content for my next video. So a spoiler-free review. Our protagonist, Nora, decides to take her own life at the beginning of the book, and the first couple of chapters we get to see the events that led to this decision. And when she takes a bunch of pills, she ends up in the Midnight Library. And she meets a librarian there who explains to her that this is the place between life and death. So in her root life, right now, her body is going through the process of dying, but she's not dead yet. She's in this kind of limbo. All of the books in the library are different lives that she could have lived if she made different choices. While she is in this limbo, she's not dead, but she's also not alive. She's going through the process of dying. The Midnight Library exists. But as soon as her body dies in her root life, the library will be gone. She has this limited time when she can read all of these books. And so for the rest of the book, we're following her as she picks up different books with different choices and gets to live them. She gets transferred into the life that she chooses, and she gets to live it for a little bit. And if she gets disappointed in this life, she's gonna disappear and come back to the Midnight Library, and then she can move on to a different book and different life. I think that's the quick synopsis that I can give without spoiling the book. I mean, that's pretty much the entire adventure, but the main purpose of the book and the core of the book is in the message that it delivers at the end, and everything that happens in the story leads to that moment. I personally really like this book, but it is I feel like it's a hard book to recommend. I would just recommend to read this book because I think the message is really interesting. If you like, I don't know, softcore philosophy, I thought it was really easy to read. I thought it was bold and straightforward. Because of the trigger warning, I am a little bit hesitant to extend the invitation to read this book to anyone, because I personally find this book uplifting, and it really uplifted me. I think that's just the best word that I can find for this book. This book just found me in the right moment where that's exactly what I was looking for, and that's why I really liked it. If you are intrigued by the premise, you're not gonna lose much if you just start and see where it goes. I'm gonna transition into a spoiler review.
All right, let's ruin some lives. Ready?
Hey! Guys! Voldemort killed her!
Let's get into it. Nora is in a hard spot in her life. She doesn't like the job that she has. She feels a lot of regrets about the choices that she made. Like, she broke up with her boyfriend that she thought she should not have broken up with. She doesn't have any relationship with her brother. She used to be in a band, and the band kind of broken up because of her, because she had anxiety and a fear of the stage, so she couldn't be a songwriter. She couldn't perform in the stage. She was a great songwriter. And she meets one of her former band members And it kind of leads into a very uncomfortable discussion. And the first couple of chapters of the book we're basically following Nora some hours before she decided to kill herself. And the book is written from Nora's perspective. Is it? So we're following Nora as she goes through her day, that day when she decides to take her own life. And we're told about all of these things that are not working out for her, that she feels like her life does not matter. So all of these things pile up, and then she decides to take a bunch of pills, and she finds herself in this library and meets a librarian. And a librarian is a lady who she used to know in elementary school, the teacher who showed her some kindness and who she trusted at a time. And this lady will be our kind of focal point that we're gonna be coming back to as Nora explores all of these books and reads all of these books. And what the librarian basically tells her is that this library is the place between life and death, and she is currently in a place between life and death. She decided to take her own life, but she's not dead yet, and she can make a different choice right now. She can pick up a book and read it, and if this is the life that she wants to live, she can choose to live that life. She can choose to stay in that life. So it's basically a parallel universe story, but it's less scientific and more philosophical and psychological. And there's also a Book of Regrets, a really interesting concept. It's basically a book where Nora reads all of the regrets that she ever had in her life, like she didn't do this or she did this, and they're all written out. And as she progresses through the story and as she explores other lives that she could have lived, those regrets start disappearing. The lessons that she learned is that some of the regrets were not regrets. They were, in a sense, they were in her head, in a sense that she thought she would live a better life if she did that thing, but actually that's wrong. That was my cat. I do not apologize a lot. For example, Nora broke up with Dan, who she thought was her soulmate, but at the time she wasn't sure if she wanted to continue living with this person. And then she broke up with him, and he was one of the reasons that she decided to take her own life, because she thought she could have lived a very happy life with him, but she missed that chance. And that was one of the regrets that she had in her book. Well, then the librarian asks her, okay, what is the life that you want to explore? And I think one of the first decisions that she makes is she said, I want to see a life where I am with Dan. A whole thing about Dan is that Dan's dream was to make this bar, and that Nora did not follow up with that dream. But she lives that, she gets transferred into this life where she is with Dan and he's her husband, and they have this bar, and everything looks happy and looks like the life that she imagined she would have lived if she chose to stay with Dan. But something is off. Another thing that I forgot to mention about this is that when she gets transferred into a new life, she does not have memories of that life. So she's basically a stranger in her own body in a new life, but she's still her. People around her obviously are unaware that she's a different person on the inside. And so she kind of has to pick up on the clues, like, oh, a lot of the times she would look into the mirror at herself and talk about how she looks and say things like, my hair looks healthier in this life, or my hair looks less healthy in this life, or my body looks really strong. In one of the lives, she did a bunch of burpees and was like, wow, I can do a lot of burpees. And I thought that was really funny. Continuing with that life, she thought that this was the happy life that she wanted to live, but then she goes to bed with Dan, and she, through conversation, picks up that he actually cheated on her and that he has a big alcohol problem that she did not take very seriously when they were dating. And so she starts regretting and getting disappointed in this life. And the moment she gets disappointed, she disappears from this life and she goes back into the library. And then the librarian meets her there and asks her, okay, what is the next life that you want to pick? So Nora goes through several lives. She goes through a life where she kept up with her parents. She went through the life where she became a professional swimmer, where she was in a band and was a successful songwriter. I think one of the more interesting lives that she chose was her cat that died at the beginning of the book. It got hit by a car. The person who stopped by her door and told her that the cat was just by the road, they kind of assumed that the cat was hit by a car, and Nora was blaming herself for not looking after the cat. Nora was blaming herself for letting her cat be an outdoor cat. And the cat name is Volts. So she asks for a life where Volts was an indoor cat. And then she gets transferred in that life, and Volts dies right away. And then she gets transferred back into the mid.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
She returns to the library and she's really mad at the librarian, and she goes, I ask you for a life where Volts is an indoor cat. And the librarian tells her, well, you got that life and he still died. And Nora gets really upset, saying, well, why did you transfer me to this life if you knew that I would have to go through this again? And that's trauma. I don't want to go through this. And the librarian explains to her that no matter what she would have chosen for her cat, he would have died anyway, because he actually did not die because of the car. He died because he had a certain cat disease that would have killed him anyway. So it kind of adds a layer of complexity to not everything in Nora's life, not every choice depends on her. So she could not have lived a life where her cat would have died of old age because he had this disease. There was another interesting bit where she meets the bear in Antarctica, where she becomes a scientist. And there are actually two things that happen in that life. She meets a guy who is also a traveler, and I think their conversation goes, he traveled through a lot more lives than Nora has, and his midnight library was not a library at all. His midnight library was actually a game shop, and she kind of laughs at it, and they discuss how the midnight library might be different for people depending on what makes sense for me, maybe like a happy place. And for him, it was not a librarian. Obviously, it was his uncle. Correct me if I'm wrong, might be wrong, but that was one of his relatives. So they speculate that this place between life and death might be a library, or it might be some kind of happy place. And the person, it might be God, or it might be death, or it might be some kind of guardian angel. It looks like it takes the form of a person who showed them some kindness at some point in their life and who means something to them. And in that same life, she meets a bear, and she gets that fear, obviously, a fear of meeting a bear, and realizing that was kind of an epiphany for her. I am actually going to maybe find that spot. She starts to realize that there is a real threat to her life coming onto her right now, and she thinks, oh fuck. And she screams in her head to the librarian, please take me back to the library. I don't want this life. I don't want to die. But she's not disappointed in this life, which is why she's not disappearing, because she can only disappear from the life when she's disappointed about this life. So this epiphany hits her that she wants to be alive. She does not want to die. And after that, I think the book kind of takes a turn onto Nora not trying to find a perfect life, but more she's exploring what other lives she could have lived. She's really passionate about taking on all of these lives, and we get to explore some of them, but then closer to the end of the book, they just kind of, there's like an entire chapter where she just goes through Nora was this and that and this and that. And then at the end, she finds a really good life, a life where she has a daughter and she has a husband and she has a happy life, and she lives this life for a lot longer than she lived any other lives. And the more she lives in this life, the more she feels like she doesn't belong in it, because she's the wrong person. She's not that person who's supposed to be living this life. But she also doesn't want to disappear because she has a daughter in this life that she really loves, and it seems like she has a husband who really loves her, but she's also not, she feels like an imposter basically. But she's also not disappearing from that life because it is a perfect life, and she keeps waking up every day willing to live this life, and then she goes to bed terrified that she will not wake up in this life, and she keeps telling herself, this is the life I want, this is the perfect life. Eventually she leaves that life behind, and she at first does not understand why, but then she realizes that it's actually because Camille, stop! Actually later realizes that it is because that life was not for her. That was not her life. The life that is hers is the one where she is hanging between life and death. And so the bigger message of this book is that, yes, there are choices that you could have made that would have led to different lives and maybe more perfect lives. But that doesn't mean that the life that you have right now doesn't have potential to do anything. Your life is basically in your hands. And whatever choices you make right now, you can change the life that you have. The best quote from the book that I really like is that Miss Elm, the librarian, keeps repeating over and over is, you don't have to understand life, you just have to live it. And I think it's just a really good message. So she finally decides that she does not want to die, but the library is falling apart because she's dying in her life. So she's running out of this collapsing building, and the books are getting destroyed, and the librarian kind of died. I mean, she disappeared, but she disappeared with the go live your life, go find the book that is your current life and start writing it, just start writing it. So she finds this book, and it's such a great moment in the book that I just enjoyed so much, because she tries to write out so many different things. So she tries to write Nora decided to live and nothing happens, and then she tries Nora was ready to live, and then she tries a bunch of things, and then in the end she writes I am alive, and that's when she gets transferred back to her life. And once she's back into her body, and she obviously goes to the ER because she throws up all of the pills that she has taken, and she starts making the changes, like small changes. She reaches out to her brother who she hasn't spoken to in a while, and they make a connection again. And again, I feel like the bigger message of the book was that life is basically a mold, and it's a soft mold that a lot of the things are out of your control, but a lot of the things are also in your control, and you can take control over those things, and you can make choices that will lead to a better life. You don't necessarily need to think about all the regrets and all the things that you've done in the past, because you don't know what those choices could have led to. You maybe think that if you didn't break up with that person, you would have had a great life, but maybe that's not the case. All you can have right now and all you can work with right now is the life that you have. So this was a long summary. Now I'm going to go into pros and cons and then to recommendations. And I missed things here and there, but these are kind of the brightest moments that I remember from the book and the moments that really hit me hard. Pro number one, parallel universes. I have not read a lot of books that used parallel universes in the same way that this book used. It was more philosophical and more like a spiritual level and not scientific, which I really enjoyed. I feel like it was not the core of the book. It was a tool to deliver the story and to deliver a bigger message. If you're looking for a more scientific parallel universe story, I think The Dark Matter by Blake Crouch is a good book. I was remembering that it's a lot darker than, it's a lot darker in a scientific way. Like it's a more sci-fi, darker parallel universe book. Pro number 2, the message of the book. I think the book from the beginning, it had a purpose and it read like a book with a purpose. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard to describe how I feel about it, but from the beginning, I felt like the author had something to say, and through that story, I was waiting for that message to be fully delivered, and it kind of felt like I was moving towards some purpose, and I was finding the purpose of life with Nora, and that really captivated me. I really felt like I wanted to follow this protagonist and see what's gonna happen. What is the answer to this? What is the answer to the things that she's struggling with? Pro number 3, it's easy to read. It's fairly short. I mean, as short as a book can be. I think it's about 200 something pages. 288 pages. I know some people don't like this book because they think it's too short. For me, it was the perfect size.
That's what she said.
And I also like that it's broken into thematic chapters, and some chapters are shorter than others, but most chapters are pretty short. And I like that. I don't know why I don't like longer chapters. They stress me out. That's just too much commitment. The book was very straightforward and bold, and it kind of ties in with my previous pro, but everything in the book felt like it was moving towards this purpose, this final goal, or this final message, and everything that happened had a purpose. And the story wasn't just flying around everywhere. It was very deliberate, and I really like that. All right, we're gonna move towards some cons and some things that I did not like, which is a much shorter list because I really like this book. Con number 1, too many choices. It's really great that the author explored a lot of the choices that Nora could have taken, and it was really creative and fun to see all of these lives and how they are. Most of them were kind of twisted. Like at first, Nora thought that, oh, this is the perfect life, and then something is off. Like the life where she actually followed her friend to Australia, it ended up that her friend in Australia died, and that was just terrible for her. That was a big trauma and the disappointment that led her to leave that life. Closer to the later half of the book, I started kind of getting bored. I think after the incident with the bear, where she realized that she wanted to be alive, I was getting a little bit bored with just reading about all of these, lives, because it was kind of a repetitive pattern of, yes, this life is gonna seem like perfect to her, but she's gonna find something and she's gonna leave it. So between her meeting the bear and realizing that she wants to be alive, and her finding the perfect life that she ended up leaving, that bit was a little bit less interesting to me. Con number 2, it's predictable. I heard some people say that they found this book very predictable, and I think to an extent, yes. I kind of closer to like the middle of the book, I was understanding, like realizing what the message is going to be, and I was predicting that the message is probably going to be that she's going to come back to her original life, and something is going to be tied to that life, the decision that she's going to make. Spent a couple chapters with Nora in this perfect life where she really, really, really wanted to stay. That's when I was having some doubts and thinking, oh, maybe she will find a perfect life, and maybe she will stay with this life. Maybe she will kind of transition into being in this life, because I think the librarian said that when you find a perfect life, you're going to slowly just forget about the Midnight Library, and you're going to forget about all of these other lives, and you're going to feel like you really belong in this life. And I thought that this is what's going to happen at the perfect life, but it didn't. But I was still not disappointed with the conclusion, because at the end she had kind of like a letter on her social media that she posted, and that letter was really a letter to us, the readers, and I thought it was very touchy, and it was conveying this message in a really beautiful way that just really touched me. I thought it was really good. That's really all I have for cons. There isn't a lot of cons. I really enjoyed this book. I would give it 6 out of 5 stars. I don't like rating books that much because if I really, really like a book, it's gonna be 6 out of 5. But if I don't like the book, it's gonna be like 0 out of 5. I would recommend this book to people. Okay, I think there should be some discretion because it does touch on suicide and depression, some triggering topics. So I think if you're struggling, you should make your own judgment based on what I've talked about here. So if you're struggling and you don't think that this book, and you think that this book is gonna trigger you, maybe don't read it. I think it's a really hard book to recommend because there is a trigger warning here. Although I don't think that suicide is the focal point of this book. It's what starts the story and gets her into the library, but that's not where the story is tied into, if that makes sense. I would say if you're really interested in this message and interested in this premise, then read it. Just use your own judgment. Just please use your own judgment. It has a good message to convey to people who are struggling or might be struggling, or for really, I mean, anyone, because it's really not exactly about how to get out of depression. It's about the purpose of life. And I thought it was a really interesting way to present the author's thoughts about this question. I would even maybe classify it as like soft core philosophy. I think that's it for my review. I hope you like it. Please let me know in the comments. If you read this book, please let me know in the comments what you thought about it, and let me know what you thought of this video. I will see you hopefully in the next one. Bye!